Mia Lawson ran through the dark trees with her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. Behind her, voices shouted her name, and none of them were friendly. Branches scraped her arms as she pushed forward, her bare feet slipping on wet leaves. She did not know where she was going. She only knew she had to keep moving, because if the pack caught her tonight, they would not listen to a single word she said. Just an hour earlier, she had been standing in the middle of the pack hall, surrounded by people who had hated her for as long as she could remember. Dalton, the Alpha's son, had pointed a finger at her chest and called her a curse. The whole room had agreed with him. Nobody had asked her to explain. Nobody ever did. Mia had grown up inside the Ashwood pack, but she had never truly belonged to it. She was found as a small child on the edge of the pack's land, alone, cold, and unable to explain how she got there. That same night, the Alpha's mate had died under strange circumstances nearby. From that day on, the pack decided Mia was somehow connected to the tragedy, even though she had been too young to understand what had happened, let alone cause it. She grew up doing the lowest jobs in the pack. She cleaned the training grounds. She carried firewood for families who would not look her in the eye. She was given scraps of food after everyone else had eaten. The other pack children were taught to fight, to hunt, to shift, and to be proud of who they were. Mia was taught only one lesson, over and over again: know your place, and do not expect anything more. Years passed, but nothing changed. If a chore was left undone, they blamed Mia. If food went missing, they blamed Mia. If a hunt failed, somehow that was her fault too. She had stopped trying to defend herself a long time ago, because no one ever believed her anyway. She learned to keep her eyes down and her voice quiet. She learned to disappear into corners so that people would forget she existed, at least for a little while. The worst of it always came from Dalton and his group of friends. Dalton was the Alpha's only son, tall, confident, and admired by everyone in the pack. He never had to work for anything. People smiled at him wherever he walked. And when he was cruel to Mia, in front of others or behind closed doors, no one ever stopped him. If anything, they seemed to enjoy watching him do it. That evening had started like any other. The pack had gathered for a meeting after border scouts reported movement from the Kirkwood clan, a rival pack that had been testing the edges of Ashwood territory for weeks. Everyone was on edge, worried about what the increased activity might mean. In the middle of the tension, one of the scouts reported that a patrol route, one that was supposed to be secret, had somehow reached Kirkwood ears. The room had gone silent for a moment, and then, one by one, eyes turned toward Mia. She had not been anywhere near the patrol plans. She did not even know the details of the routes, but it did not matter. Someone needed to be blamed, and blaming Mia had always been easy. Dalton stepped forward first, his voice loud enough for the entire hall to hear. "She has always brought trouble to this pack," he said, "ever since the night my mother died. Now our patrols are compromised, and you are all still pretending she is harmless." Whispers spread through the crowd like fire through dry grass. Mia tried to speak, tried to explain that she had nothing to do with any of it, but her voice was drowned out before she could even finish a sentence. The council members exchanged glances. Someone suggested she should be questioned. Someone else suggested banishment. The word hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. Mia felt the walls of the hall pressing in around her. She had faced insults before. She had faced isolation, hunger, and endless blame. But banishment was different. Banishment meant being sent out into unclaimed land, without protection, without a pack, without any guarantee of survival. For a wolf, especially one who had never learned to fully trust her own strength, it was close to a death sentence. She did not wait to hear the council's final decision. When the meeting broke apart into arguing voices, she slipped through a side door and ran. She had barely made it past the training grounds when she heard footsteps behind her. Dalton and 3 of his friends had followed her out, laughing at first, as if this were some kind of game. Mia kept walking faster, refusing to look back, hoping they would grow bored and turn around. They did not. "Where do you think you are going?" Dalton called out. "Running away proves everyone right about you." Mia's hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had learned long ago that showing fear only made things worse. She turned to face them, standing her ground even though every instinct told her to keep running. "I did not leak any patrol route," she said, her voice steady, despite the pounding in her chest. "I do not even know where the routes are marked." Dalton laughed, a short, sharp sound with no warmth in it, It does not matter what you know. It matters what you are. You have always been bad luck for this pack, Mia. Everyone knows it. Even you know it, deep down. The words hit harder than she expected, not because they were new, but because she had heard them so many times that a small part of her had started to believe them. She had spent her whole life wondering if there was some truth buried underneath the pack's hatred, some reason they could sense that she could not. One of Dalton's friends stepped closer, circling around her the way a predator might circle something smaller and weaker. Mia's back pressed against the rough bark of a tree. Her heart raced, and for one long moment, she thought this might be the night everything finally fell apart completely. Then, from the darkness beyond the trees, a low voice cut through the tension. "That is enough." Everyone turned. An older man stepped out from the shadows, his presence immediately commanding attention despite his age. Mia recognized him instantly. Warwick. A retired member of the Pack Council, respected by many, though he had kept mostly to himself in recent years. He was known for his sharp mind and his refusal to involve himself in pack politics, which made his sudden appearance even more surprising. Dalton straightened up, clearly caught off guard. "Warwick, this does not concern you." "It concerns me the moment I see 4 wolves cornering one girl in the dark," Warwick said calmly, his eyes moving over each of them in turn. "Go home, Dalton. All of you. Before I decide this is worth reporting to your father." The mention of the Alpha seemed to do what nothing else could. Dalton's friends exchanged uneasy glances, and after a tense pause, they backed away, muttering under their breath. Dalton lingered a moment longer, his eyes locked on Mia with a mixture of anger and something else she could not quite name. Then he turned and disappeared into the darkness, his friends following close behind. Mia let out a breath she did not realize she had been holding. Her legs felt weak, and she slid down against the tree trunk, sitting on the cold ground. Warwick approached slowly, careful not to startle her further. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, though her whole body was still trembling. "Why did you help me?" Warwick was quiet for a moment, studying her with an expression she had never seen from anyone in the pack before. It was not pity. It was not suspicion. It looked almost like curiosity, mixed with something heavier, something that looked like guilt. "Because I have watched this pack treat you unfairly for a long time," he said finally. "And tonight, I decided I was tired of staying silent about it." Mia did not know how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever suggested that the way she was treated might be wrong, rather than deserved. She studied Warwick's face, searching for some sign that this was a trick, some hidden motive behind his sudden kindness. But all she saw was quiet sincerity. "They are going to banish me," she said softly. "Or worse." Warwick's jaw tightened. "Not if I can help it." He offered her a hand, helping her up from the ground. Mia hesitated before taking it, unused to anyone offering help without expecting something in return. As she stood, she noticed the way Warwick glanced toward the pack hall in the distance, his expression darkening, as if he were remembering something from long ago. "There is more to your story than this pack has ever told you," he said quietly. "More than even I understood, until recently." Mia's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Warwick did not answer right away. Instead, he looked around the dark forest, as if making sure they were truly alone. "Not here," he said. "It is not safe to talk about this out in the open. Come with me. There are things you deserve to know, Mia. Things this pack has hidden from you your entire life." Mia stared at him, torn between fear and desperate curiosity. Her entire world had just threatened to collapse in the pack hall, and now this stranger, who had never spoken more than a passing word to her before tonight, was hinting at secrets buried deep enough to change everything. She thought of the years of blame, the constant suspicion, the whispers that followed her wherever she went. She thought of the night the Alpha's mate had died, the same night she had been found alone at the edge of the territory, unable to explain how she got there. She had always been told the story ended there, a tragic mystery with her at its center. But what if it did not end there at all? What if it had never truly begun the way the pack believed? Her legs still trembled from fear, but something new stirred beneath it, a small flicker of hope she had not allowed herself to feel in years. She looked at Warwick, at the seriousness in his eyes, and made a decision that would change the course of her entire life. "Take me there," she said, Whatever it is, I need to know the truth." Warwick nodded slowly, and without another word, he turned and led her deeper into the forest, away from the pack that had never once tried to understand her, and toward a truth that had been buried for 11 long years. Behind them, the lights of the pack hall grew smaller and smaller, until they disappeared completely into the darkness. Mia did not look back. For the first time in her life, she was walking toward something, instead of running away from everything. She had no idea that the truth waiting for her would not only change how the pack saw her, but would shake the very foundation the Ashwood pack had been built on. Warwick led Mia along a narrow path that most of the pack had forgotten existed. It wound through thick trees, past an old stream, and up a small rocky hill that overlooked the valley, where the Ashwood pack made its home. Mia followed without speaking, her mind racing with questions she was almost afraid to ask out loud. Every few minutes, she glanced behind her, half expecting Dalton and his friends to appear again, but the forest remained quiet, except for the sound of their footsteps and the wind moving through the leaves. At the top of the hill stood a small stone cabin, hidden behind a curtain of ivy and old trees. It looked abandoned from the outside, but when Warwick pushed the door open, Mia saw shelves lined with old books, faded maps, and boxes stacked in the corners. A single lantern sat on a wooden table, and Warwick lit it with steady hands, before motioning for her to sit. "This was my study, many years ago," he said, lowering himself into a chair across from her. "Before I stepped back from the council, I kept records here that I did not trust to keep anywhere else." Mia looked around the small room, taking in the dusty shelves and the faint smell of old paper. "Records about what?" Warwick did not answer immediately. He reached toward one of the shelves and pulled down a thick, worn journal, its leather cover cracked with age. He placed it on the table between them, but kept his hand resting on top of it, as if hesitant to let it go completely. "About the night you were found," he said quietly, "and about the night the Alpha's mate died." Mia's chest tightened. She had heard the story of that night more times than she could count, always told the same way, always ending with her being blamed for something she could not remember doing. "I already know what happened that night," she said, though her voice wavered slightly. "Everyone has told me the same story since I was a child." "They have told you a story," Warwick said. "Not the truth. There is a difference." He opened the journal carefully, flipping through pages filled with small, careful handwriting. Mia leaned forward despite herself, curiosity pulling her closer, even as fear told her to be cautious. Warwick stopped on a page near the middle of the journal and turned it toward her. "I was part of the search party that found you that night," he said. "You were very young, barely old enough to walk steadily on your own. You were alone, cold, and frightened, but you were not injured, not a single mark on you." Mia frowned. "That is what I have always been told, that I was found alone, with no explanation." "What you were not told," Warwick continued, "is that the Alpha's mate was found a good distance away, near the eastern border, not anywhere close to where you were discovered. The pack has always blurred that detail, letting people assume the two events happened in the same place, at the same moment. They did not." Mia's mind spun as she tried to process what he was telling her. Then why did everyone believe I was connected to what happened to her? Warwick's expression grew heavier. Because it was convenient. A grieving pack needed someone to direct their pain toward. A lost child, with no family to speak for her, no history anyone could verify, made an easy target. It was easier to build a story around you than to ask harder questions about what truly happened that night. The room felt colder suddenly, even with the lantern's warm light flickering between them. Mia thought of every accusing glance she had endured over the years, every whispered rumor, every time she had been blamed simply because it was easier than searching for real answers. Anger began to rise inside her, sharp and unfamiliar, mixing with the fear she had carried for so long. "If I was not connected to what happened," she said slowly, "then why was I out there at all? Where did I come from?" Warwick turned another page in the journal, revealing a faded, hand-drawn symbol at the top of the page. It looked like a wolf's head surrounded by a circle of small stars, elegant and precise, clearly crafted with great care. This mark belonged to a bloodline that existed long before the current pack leadership, Warwick explained. A founding bloodline, one that many believed had ended generations ago, wiped out during a period of conflict within the pack itself. Mia stared at the symbol, something about it stirring a strange, distant familiarity she could not explain. What does this have to do with me? Warwick reached into the journal once more and pulled out a small folded piece of cloth. He unfolded it carefully, revealing a tiny embroidered patch bearing the exact same symbol. This was found stitched into the collar of the blanket you were wrapped in the night you were discovered, he said. I kept it hidden, along with a few other things, because even then, something about your presence that night did not add up the way the pack claimed it did. Mia's hands trembled as she reached out to touch the small piece of cloth. The fabric was old and worn, but the symbol remained clear, stitched with a level of skill that suggested it had been made with great importance in mind. Why would someone hide this? Because if certain people within the pack believed this bloodline still existed, Warwick said carefully, it would have threatened positions of power that had been carefully arranged after the previous conflict ended. A lost heir returning, even unknowingly, could shift everything. Mia sat back in her chair, her thoughts racing faster than she could organize them. She thought about her entire childhood, every year spent believing she was cursed, unwanted, connected to tragedy through some fault of her own. She had built her entire understanding of herself around that belief. Now Warwick was suggesting that belief had been built on a lie, one that others had chosen to protect for their own reasons. Why are you telling me this now? She asked. You could have told me years ago. Warwick's expression turned regretful. I should have. I told myself I needed more proof before saying anything, that revealing incomplete information might do more harm than good. But watching what happened tonight, watching how close they came to casting you out, or worse, I could not stay silent any longer. Waiting for perfect proof was costing you your entire childhood. Mia looked down at the symbol again, tracing its careful stitching with her fingertips. Part of her wanted to believe everything Warwick was telling her, desperate for any explanation that did not place blame on her shoulders. But another part of her remained cautious, aware that trusting too quickly had never worked out well for her before. How do I know this is true? She asked quietly. How do I know you are not simply telling me what I want to hear? Warwick did not seem offended by the question. If anything, he looked relieved that she was thinking carefully rather than accepting everything without question. You do not know. Not yet, he admitted. That is why we need more than an old journal and a piece of cloth. We need proof, strong enough that even the council cannot dismiss it. What kind of proof? Warwick closed the journal slowly. There were others involved that night, wolves who helped search the border, who might remember details that were never recorded. There may also be records within the pack archive itself, documents that were sealed away after the founding bloodline was declared extinct. If we can find those records, we may be able to piece together exactly what happened and why you were left there that night. Mia felt a strange mixture of fear and determination settle over her. For years, she had wanted nothing more than to understand why the pack treated her the way they did. Now, faced with the possibility of real answers, she realized she was not sure she was ready for what those answers might reveal. But she also knew she could not go back to the life she had been living, quietly accepting blame for things she did not do, waiting for the day the pack finally decided she was no longer worth tolerating. I want to know, she said finally, her voice steady, despite the fear still coursing through her. Whatever the truth is, I need to know it. Warwick nodded, a small measure of respect visible in his eyes. Then we will need to be careful. If certain people within this pack have worked to keep this hidden for over a decade, they will not welcome anyone digging it back up, especially not you. Mia thought of Dalton's cold eyes in the forest, of the council members who had so easily suggested banishment without a second thought. If there truly were people within the pack who had buried this secret on purpose, exposing it would not be simple or safe. Where do we start? She asked. Warwick stood, moving toward a small wooden chest tucked into the corner of the room. He opened it carefully, revealing old scrolls, faded letters, and a collection of small personal items that looked as though they had been untouched for years. We start with the wolves, who were part of that search party, he said. Some of them are still alive, though scattered now, living quiet lives far from pack politics. If anyone remembers the truth of that night, it will be them. Mia stood as well, feeling a strange sense of purpose settle over her, something she had rarely experienced in her life within the pack. For years, she had simply existed, absorbing blame and staying invisible in hopes of avoiding further pain. Now, for the first time, she felt like she was moving toward something, rather than simply surviving each day as it came. "What about Dalton?" she asked. "And the council? If they find out what we are doing?" "We will need to move carefully," Warwick said. "Quietly, and without drawing attention, until we have enough proof to make our case undeniable. Until then, you cannot return to the pack grounds. It is not safe for you there. Not after tonight." The weight of his words settled over her slowly. Leaving the pack grounds meant leaving behind everything familiar, even if that familiarity had mostly been made of pain and rejection. It meant stepping into the unknown, trusting a man she had barely spoken to before tonight, chasing a truth that could either free her or destroy what little stability she had left. But staying meant continuing to live as an outcast, blamed for things beyond her control, waiting for the day the pack finally turned on her completely. Between those two choices, the decision did not feel difficult at all. "Then let us start tonight," Mia said. "I am tired of waiting for the truth to find me. I would rather go find it myself." Warwick studied her for a long moment, something like quiet pride settling into his expression. "Very well," he said. "Gather what little you need from the pack grounds before sunrise, quickly and quietly. After that, we begin searching for the people who can finally tell us what truly happened the night your life changed forever." As Mia stepped back out into the cold night air, the weight of everything she had just learned pressed heavily against her chest. The symbol stitched into that old piece of cloth burned itself into her memory, a quiet promise that her story was far more complicated than the pack had ever allowed her to believe. For the first time in 11 years, Mia did not walk back toward the pack hall with her head down, bracing for more blame and rejection. She walked with her eyes lifted toward the horizon, toward a truth waiting somewhere beyond the borders of everything she had ever known. Whatever awaited her, she was finally ready to face it. The first light of morning had not yet touched the sky when Mia slipped back into the pack grounds. She moved quickly through the shadows, careful to avoid the paths the night guards usually patrolled. Her small room at the edge of the servant quarters looked exactly the way she had left it, plain and bare, with only a thin blanket and a few worn clothes to her name. It did not take long to gather what little she owned. She had spent her entire life learning how to need very little, and now that lesson made leaving easier than it should have felt. As she stepped back outside, she paused for a moment, looking toward the pack hall in the distance. Lights still glowed faintly from a few windows, meaning some of the council members were likely still awake, discussing what had happened the night before, and deciding her fate without her presence. A part of her wanted to march inside and demand they listen to her, but she knew that path would only end the same way it always had. She turned away from the hall and made her way back toward the tree line, where Warwick waited for her, half hidden in the shadows. "No one saw you?" he asked quietly. "No one," Mia confirmed, though her heart still pounded from the tension of moving so carefully through the grounds she had once considered, at least in some small way, her home. They moved swiftly through the forest as the sky slowly began to lighten, heading away from Ashwood territory entirely. Warwick explained that their first destination was a small settlement several hours away, where one of the original search party members, a woman named Priya, had chosen to live quietly after leaving pack politics behind many years earlier. The journey gave Mia time to think, though her thoughts offered little comfort. She kept replaying the symbol from the old journal in her mind, the careful stitching on the small cloth patch, the quiet certainty in Warwick's voice as he spoke about a bloodline everyone believed had ended long ago. If what he suspected was true, then everything she had believed about herself, every insult she had accepted as fact, had been built on a lie, crafted by people determined to protect their own power. By mid-morning, they reached the edge of a quiet village, nestled between rolling hills, far removed from the tension and politics of pack life. Warwick led her toward a small home near the edge of the settlement, its garden neatly kept, flowers blooming along a stone path leading to the front door. A woman answered after Warwick knocked, her expression shifting from polite curiosity to visible shock the moment she recognized him. "Warwick," she said slowly. "It has been a long time." "Too long," Warwick agreed. "I am sorry to arrive without warning, Priya, but this could not wait." Priya's eyes moved past him, landing on Mia, and something flickered across her face, something that looked almost like recognition, though Mia was certain they had never met before. After a moment of hesitation, Priya stepped aside and invited them in. Her home was small but warm, filled with the comfortable clutter of a life lived quietly and peacefully. She offered them tea, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared it, and Mia sensed that whatever memories Warwick's visit had stirred were not easy ones. "I assume this is about that night," Priya said once they were all seated, her eyes fixed on Mia with careful attention. "The night we found her." Mia's breath caught. "You remember me?" Priya nodded slowly. "I have never forgotten that night, even after all these years. I was one of the first to reach you, out near the old boundary stones. You were so small, wrapped in a blanket that was far too fine for someone left abandoned in the woods." "The blanket with the symbol," Mia said quietly, glancing toward Warwick. Priya's eyes widened slightly. "So you know about that then?" I wondered if it had survived all these years, or if it had been quietly destroyed along with everything else from that night. "Everything else?" Mia asked, leaning forward. Priya set her teacup down carefully, her expression growing distant as she remembered. "There were things about that night that never made sense to those of us in the search party. You were found calm, almost as if someone had deliberately placed you in a safe location before disappearing. There were no signs of struggle near you, no indication you had wandered there alone. A frightened child who had truly been lost or abandoned carelessly would not have been found so peacefully settled." Mia absorbed this new information slowly, trying to reconcile it with the story she had been told her entire life. "The pack always said, I must have wandered away from wherever I came from, that no one ever came looking for me because I had no family left to search." Priya shook her head firmly. "That is not what those of us present that night believed. We searched the surrounding area extensively in the days that followed, hoping to find any trace of where you might have come from. We found signs of a struggle much further away, near the eastern ridge, close to where the Alpha's mate was later found. It was clear something serious had happened out there, something far more complicated than a lost child wandering the forest alone." "Then why did the pack connect the two events so directly?" Mia asked, though she suspected she already knew part of the answer. "Because it was simpler," Priya said, echoing Warwick's earlier words. "Grief makes people desperate for explanations, even incomplete ones, and there were certain individuals within the council at the time who seemed eager to close the investigation quickly, discouraging further questions before they could be fully explored." Mia glanced at Warwick, who nodded in confirmation. "I remember those discussions," he said. "I raised concerns myself, questioning why the investigation ended so abruptly. I was told the matter was settled, that continuing to dig would only cause further pain to a grieving pack. At the time, I accepted that explanation. I regret that decision more than I can express." Priya reached over and gently placed a hand on Mia's arm, her expression softening with sympathy. "I always wondered what happened to you after that night. I heard rumors over the years, whispers about how the pack treated you, but I had already left pack life behind by then. I am sorry I never returned to check on you myself." Mia swallowed hard, unused to receiving kindness so freely from someone she had only just met. "It is not your fault," she said quietly. "None of this is anyone's fault except the people who chose to hide the truth." "There is something else," Priya said, glancing toward Warwick, as if seeking silent permission before continuing. "Something I have never told anyone, because I was not certain it mattered until now." Mia's heart quickened. "What is it?" Priya stood and walked toward a small wooden box tucked into a shelf near the fireplace. She opened it carefully, revealing a collection of old letters tied together with faded string. She flipped through them slowly, before pulling one free and handing it to Mia. "This letter was found near the eastern ridge, not far from where the signs of struggle were discovered," Priya explained. "I kept it because something about it felt important, even though I never fully understood why at the time." Mia unfolded the letter carefully, her eyes scanning the faded handwriting. The letter spoke of danger approaching, of a need to protect someone precious before it was too late, and of a promise to return, once it was safe to do so. The letter was unsigned, but the handwriting carried a hurried, desperate quality that made the words feel painfully real, even after so many years. "Who wrote this?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I do not know for certain," Priya admitted. "But given where it was found, and the timing of everything else that happened that night, I have always believed it was written by whoever was protecting you, someone who never had the chance to return as promised. Mia stared at the letter for a long moment, emotions swirling inside her that she could not fully name. Somewhere, long ago, someone had cared enough to try to protect her, to hide her safely before disaster struck. That knowledge alone felt like it shifted something fundamental inside her, a small crack of light breaking through years of believing she had simply been unwanted from the very beginning. "This changes everything," Warwick said quietly, studying the letter over Mia's shoulder. "If this was written by someone connected to the founding bloodline, it strongly supports what the symbol suggests. Someone went to great lengths to protect Mia that night, someone who understood the danger she was in." "But who would want to harm a child?" Mia asked, her voice tightening with a mixture of confusion and quiet anger. Priya and Warwick exchanged a heavy glance before Warwick answered carefully. "If certain individuals within the pack believed the founding bloodline still existed and feared what that might mean for their own positions of power, a child connected to that bloodline could be seen as a significant threat, regardless of her age or innocence." The weight of his words settled over Mia slowly. The idea that someone within her own pack might have wanted her gone, not because of anything she had done, but simply because of who she might represent, felt almost too heavy to process. Yet it also explained so much of what had never made sense to her before. The persistent blame, the refusal to investigate further, the quiet discouragement of anyone who dared question the official story. "We need to find more proof," Mia said finally, folding the letter carefully and holding it close. "This is not enough on its own to convince the council, especially not against people determined to keep the truth buried. There may be one more person who can help us," Priya said thoughtfully. "An old healer named Callum, who tended to injuries during that time. If there truly was a struggle that night, he may have treated someone connected to it, someone who might still remember details we have not yet uncovered." "Is he still alive?" Warwick asked. Priya nodded. "Last I heard, he lives in the northern settlements, though he rarely involves himself in pack matters anymore. He grew tired of politics long before I did." Mia felt a renewed sense of determination settle over her, pushing aside some of the exhaustion from the sleepless night before. Every piece of information brought her closer to understanding not just what had happened that night, but who she truly was, beyond the label the pack had forced upon her for so many years. "Then we find him next," she said firmly. Warwick studied her for a long moment, something like quiet admiration in his expression. "You have changed since last night," he observed. "Somewhere between fear and exhaustion, you have found something steadier." Mia thought about his words carefully before responding. "I spent my whole life believing I deserved the way the pack treated me, that somehow I truly was connected to tragedy, even if I could not remember how. Now I am starting to believe that maybe I was never the problem at all. Maybe I was simply the excuse people needed to avoid asking harder questions." Priya smiled softly, though sadness lingered behind her eyes. "That sounds like the beginning of healing, even amid everything else happening around you." Before they left, Priya insisted on preparing food and supplies for their journey north, refusing to let them leave without proper provisions. As they said their goodbyes, she took Mia's hands gently in her own. "Whatever you discover," Priya said, "know that the truth deserves to be heard, no matter how uncomfortable it makes those who tried to bury it. You have already shown more strength than most people your age ever have to demonstrate." Mia nodded, unable to fully express how much those words meant to her, after years of hearing only criticism and blame. As they walked away from Priya's home, heading toward the northern settlements, Mia felt the letter tucked safely against her chest, a small but powerful piece of evidence that her existence had never been the mistake the pack had convinced her it was. The journey north would take another full day of travel, giving Mia time to process everything she had learned so far. Each new piece of information reshaped her understanding of her own history, slowly transforming the story she had been forced to accept into something far more complicated and far more important than she ever could have imagined. As the sun began to set behind the hills, casting long shadows across the path ahead of them, Mia allowed herself, for the first time in years, to imagine a future where she was not defined by blame and rejection. A future where the truth, no matter how difficult, finally set her free from the weight she had carried, for as long as she could remember. She did not yet know how much more painful the truth would become before it finally offered her peace, but she was ready to face whatever came next, one careful step at a time. The northern settlements looked nothing like Ashwood territory. Instead of tall wooden halls and organized training grounds, small cottages spread out across rolling farmland, connected by dirt paths lined with wildflowers. It took most of the following day to find Callum, the retired healer Priya had spoken of, who lived in a modest home near the edge of the settlement, surrounded by neatly arranged herb gardens. Callum was an older man with kind eyes and a calm, steady presence that immediately put Mia slightly more at ease. When Warwick explained why they had come, Callum's expression shifted from polite curiosity to something more serious, more careful. "I wondered if anyone would ever come asking about that night again," he said, motioning for them to sit at a small wooden table outside his home. "I assumed the truth had been buried for good." "We are trying to make sure it does not stay buried," Mia said. "Whatever you remember, even small details, could help us understand what truly happened." Callum nodded slowly, gathering his thoughts before speaking. "I remember treating a young woman that night, brought to me quietly, away from the main pack grounds. She was injured, though not critically, and she refused to explain how she had been hurt. She kept asking if a child had been found safe, over and over, as if nothing else mattered to her." Mia's breath caught. "Did she say who the child was to her?" Callum shook his head. "She never gave details, and I did not press her, given her condition. But her injuries suggested she had been in some kind of confrontation, not a simple accident. When I asked who had hurt her, she refused to answer, saying only that she needed to protect someone, and that she could not stay long." "Did you ever learn her name?" Warwick asked. Callum hesitated before answering. "She never gave her name directly, but I overheard her mention a name to herself, while she thought she was alone, repeated quietly like a promise. Elira." Mia felt something stir deep inside her at the sound of that name, though she could not explain why. It felt strangely familiar, like a word half-remembered from a dream she could no longer fully recall. "What happened to her after you treated her injuries?" Mia asked. Callum's expression grew heavier. "She left before sunrise, despite my warnings that she needed more time to heal properly. She said she had already stayed too long, that staying longer would put others at risk. I never saw her again after that night, though I always wondered what became of her." Warwick and Mia exchanged a meaningful glance. If this woman had indeed been protecting a child that night, and had disappeared shortly afterward without explanation, it strongly suggested a connection to Mia's own mysterious past. "Is there anything else you remember?" Mia pressed gently. "Anything at all, even something that seemed unimportant at the time?" Callum thought carefully before answering. "There was one more thing. When I treated her injuries, I noticed a mark on her wrist, a small tattoo shaped like a wolf's head surrounded by stars. I did not think much of it at the time, assuming it was simply a personal choice, though I have rarely seen anything quite like it since." Mia felt her heart race. The symbol matched exactly what she had seen stitched into the old blanket from that night, the same symbol connected to the founding bloodline Warwick had described. "That symbol belongs to a bloodline believed to have ended generations ago," Warwick explained quietly to Callum. "If this woman carried that mark, and was found near the same area where Mia was discovered that same night, it strongly suggests she was connected to Mia in some direct way." Callum's eyes widened slightly as understanding settled over him. "You believe this woman was protecting a child from that very bloodline, protecting you," he said, looking toward Mia with newfound recognition. "We believe it is possible," Mia said carefully, though something inside her felt increasingly certain the more evidence they uncovered. "We are trying to gather enough proof to bring this truth back to the Pack Council, to finally clear my name after years of unfair blame." Callum studied her closely for a long moment, something thoughtful and searching in his gaze. "You have her eyes," he said quietly. "I did not notice it immediately, but now that I look closely, the resemblance is unmistakable." Mia's chest tightened with a mixture of hope and overwhelming emotion. For years, she had wondered about her origins, imagining countless possibilities, most of them painful. Never had she imagined uncovering a story quite like this, one involving hidden bloodlines, sacrifice, and a woman who may have given everything to protect her, only to disappear without ever being able to return. "Do you think she is still alive somewhere?" Mia asked, unable to keep the hope from creeping into her voice. Callum's expression grew regretful. "I truly do not know. She was determined to leave despite her injuries, insisting she needed to protect others from whatever danger she was fleeing. Whether she succeeded in staying safe afterward, I cannot say with any certainty. Mia absorbed this information slowly, allowing herself a small, cautious hope alongside the weight of uncertainty. Even if this woman, this Illyra, was no longer alive, learning that someone had cared enough to risk everything protecting her felt like an important piece of healing she had never known she needed. "Thank you," Mia said sincerely. "This information means more to me than you could possibly understand." Callum reached out and gently patted her hand. "I am glad I could finally share what I witnessed that night. I have carried the memory of that frightened, injured woman for many years, always wondering if I had done enough to help her, always hoping the child she was so desperate to protect had found safety in the end." "She did," Mia said softly. "Eventually." As they prepared to leave, Callum offered one final piece of advice. "If you intend to bring this truth back to the Pack Council, be careful who you trust along the way. If certain individuals worked hard to bury this story once already, they will not welcome its return easily." Warwick nodded gravely. "We intend to gather every piece of proof possible before confronting the Council directly. We cannot risk presenting an incomplete case against those determined to protect their own secrets." As they walked away from Callum's home, the weight of everything they had learned settled heavily over Mia. She now had a name, Illyra, a possible connection to the mysterious woman who may have been her mother, and mounting evidence that the story she had believed her entire life had been carefully constructed to hide a much larger truth. They made camp that night near a quiet stream, the fire crackling softly as darkness settled fully over the surrounding hills. Mia sat quietly, staring into the flames, turning over everything they had learned throughout the day. "Do you think we have enough proof now?" she asked finally, glancing toward Warwick. He considered the question carefully before answering. "We have compelling evidence, but the Council will not accept our word alone, especially not against those determined to discredit us. We need something undeniable, something directly tied to Pack records that cannot easily be dismissed or destroyed." "The sealed archive you mentioned before," Mia said, remembering their earlier conversation. "The records from when the founding bloodline was declared extinct." Warwick nodded. "If those records still exist, and if we can access them, they would provide the strongest proof possible. Official Pack documentation is much harder to dismiss than personal testimony alone, no matter how compelling." "How do we access sealed records?" Mia asked. Warwick's expression grew serious. "Only members of the Council, or those granted specific permission, are typically allowed access. However, there may be another way, one that carries significant risk." Mia leaned forward, waiting for him to continue. "Elders who have served on the Council in the past retain limited access rights to certain archived materials, even after stepping down," Warwick explained. "I still hold that status, though I have never used it for something like this. If I request access under the guise of historical research, it may raise suspicion, but it remains within my rights as a former Council member." "Would they allow it?" Mia asked. "They may grant access reluctantly, especially if I frame the request carefully," Warwick said. "But if the wrong person becomes suspicious of why I am suddenly requesting old records, they may attempt to interfere before we can gather what we need." Mia thought about the risk involved, weighing it against everything they had already uncovered. "We have come this far already. I do not think turning back now would truly protect us from whatever risks lie ahead. If anything, stopping now would only leave us vulnerable, without enough proof to defend ourselves, if the Council decides to act against me regardless." Warwick studied her thoughtfully, clearly recognizing the truth in her words. "You are right. We cannot move forward halfway. If we are going to expose this truth, we need to be prepared to see it through completely, regardless of the risks involved." "Then we return to Ashwood," Mia said firmly, watching the fire crackle before her. "And we find those records, whatever it takes." Warwick nodded slowly, a mixture of pride and concern visible in his expression. "We will need to move carefully. If Dalton or the Council suspect we are gathering evidence against the official story, they may try to stop us before we ever reach the archive." Mia thought of Dalton's cold eyes in the forest, of the Council members who had so readily discussed banishment without hesitation. If people within the Pack had already worked to bury this truth once, they would not hesitate to protect their secrets again. especially if they realized how close Mia and Warwick had come to uncovering everything. But for the first time since childhood, Mia did not feel like a helpless victim of circumstances beyond her control. She felt like someone actively working toward the truth, someone with allies, evidence, and a growing understanding of who she truly was, beyond the label the pack had forced upon her. As the fire slowly burned lower, and exhaustion finally caught up with her, Mia allowed herself, if only for a moment, to imagine the day the entire pack would finally understand the truth about her origins, the sacrifice made to protect her, and the injustice she had endured, simply because the truth had been inconvenient for those determined to protect their own power. Whatever challenges awaited them upon their return to Ashwood, Mia was determined to face them head-on, no longer willing to accept blame for a story that had never truly belonged to her at all. Returning to Ashwood territory felt very different this time. Mia no longer approached the pack grounds with the familiar heaviness of shame she had carried for years. Instead, a quiet determination guided her steps, even as nervous energy twisted uncomfortably in her stomach. Warwick had explained the plan carefully during their journey back, but plans, no matter how carefully made, could still fail in unexpected ways. They arrived just after nightfall, slipping quietly toward the older section of the pack grounds, where the archive building stood, mostly forgotten by the younger generation, who saw little value in dusty records from decades past. Warwick used his standing as a former council member to request access, explaining to the night keeper that he wished to review old historical documents for a personal research project. The keeper, familiar with Warwick's reputation, allowed him entry without much question, though Mia noticed the way his eyes lingered curiously on her before they disappeared inside. The archive was a large room filled with towering shelves, each one packed tightly with scrolls, journals, and bound records collected over generations of pack history. Dust hung thick in the air, undisturbed for what looked like years in some sections. Warwick moved with practiced familiarity, guiding Mia toward a section near the back, where records related to significant events and bloodlines were traditionally stored. "This will take time," Warwick warned quietly. "Records from that specific period may not be easy to locate, especially if someone deliberately misplaced or hid them after the fact." Mia nodded, already reaching for the nearest shelf, scanning faded labels for anything related to the time frame they needed. They worked in careful silence for what felt like hours, sorting through countless documents, most of them irrelevant to their search. Just as exhaustion and frustration began creeping into Mia's thoughts, Warwick let out a quiet exclamation from a few shelves away. "Here," he said, pulling out a thick, sealed folder marked with an official pack emblem. "This matches the time frame we need." Mia hurried over, watching as Warwick carefully broke the old wax seal and opened the folder. Inside were several documents, along with additional notes, official records detailing council decisions made shortly after the founding bloodline had supposedly ended. As they read through the documents together, a troubling picture began to emerge. The records revealed that the founding bloodline had not actually ended through natural causes, as the pack had long believed. Instead, internal conflict within the council, decades earlier, had led to a deliberate effort to remove the bloodline from any position of influence, framed publicly as a tragic extinction, rather than what the documents suggested had truly happened, a calculated effort by rival council members to secure their own positions of power. "This confirms everything," Warwick said quietly, his expression grim as he continued reading. "Certain council members orchestrated the removal of the founding bloodline generations ago, likely eliminating direct heirs to prevent any future challenge to their authority." Mia felt sick reading through the carefully worded documents, recognizing the same manipulative language that had shaped the story of her own childhood. "If they successfully hid this once before," she said slowly, "then when I appeared 11 years ago, connected somehow to that same bloodline." "They panicked," Warwick finished grimly, "and rather than risk exposing their previous actions, they found it easier to bury the truth once again, this time using an innocent child as the scapegoat instead." As they continued searching, they found additional documents referencing a woman named Alira, listed briefly in records related to bloodline lineage tracking, though most detailed information about her had clearly been removed or destroyed. A final note, hastily scrawled and seemingly overlooked during previous efforts to erase evidence, mentioned an emergency relocation attempt made shortly before the tragic events of that fateful night. She was trying to protect you by moving you somewhere safe, Mia whispered, reading the note carefully. Someone must have discovered her plan and intervened before she could complete it. Warwick nodded solemnly, which explains the signs of struggle near the eastern ridge and why the Alpha's mate was found in that same area. If she stumbled upon Elira's escape attempt unexpectedly, perhaps trying to help or intervene herself, it may have led to the confrontation that ultimately cost her life. Mia sat back, absorbing the weight of this new understanding. The Alpha's mate had not died because of anything Mia had done. If anything, she may have died trying to protect Mia, caught unexpectedly in the middle of someone else's desperate attempt to keep a child safe from danger. This changes everything about how the Alpha himself might react to the truth, Mia said slowly. It does, Warwick agreed. Assuming he is willing to accept it, rather than simply defending the story he has believed for over a decade. They gathered every relevant document carefully, ensuring nothing crucial was left behind. As they prepared to leave the archive, quiet footsteps echoed suddenly from the entrance, causing both of them to freeze instantly. I thought I might find you here, a familiar voice said coldly. Mia turned to see Dalton standing in the doorway, his expression a mixture of suspicion and barely restrained anger. Behind him stood two council members, their expressions equally serious. What exactly are you doing in the archive this late at night? One of the council members demanded, stepping further into the room. Warwick straightened, his expression calm despite the sudden tension. Conducting research I have every right to access as a former council member. Dalton's eyes narrowed as he glanced toward the documents in Mia's hands. Research about what, exactly? Mia felt her heart pounding, but she forced herself to remain steady, remembering everything she had learned over the past several days. This confrontation, though sudden and unwelcome, presented an opportunity she could not afford to waste. About the truth, she said firmly, stepping forward despite Dalton's obvious hostility. About what truly happened the night I was found, and the night your mother died. Dalton's expression flickered with something unreadable, before hardening once again. We already know what happened that night. No, Mia said, her voice steady, despite the tension in the room. You know a story that was carefully constructed to protect certain people within this pack, people who buried the truth to avoid consequences for actions taken generations ago. The council members exchanged uneasy glances, clearly caught off guard by her confidence. Warwick stepped forward, placing the sealed documents on a nearby table for everyone to see. These records prove that the founding bloodline of this pack was not lost through natural extinction, as everyone has long believed, Warwick explained calmly. It was deliberately erased through calculated actions taken by council members, determined to protect their own authority. When Mia appeared 11 years ago, clearly connected to that same bloodline, those responsible chose to bury the truth once again, rather than risk exposing their previous actions. Dalton's expression shifted from anger to confusion, uncertainty creeping into his usually confident demeanor. That is not possible. My mother died because she likely stumbled upon an attempt to protect Mia from those seeking to eliminate her, given her connection to the founding bloodline. Warwick continued gently, though firmly. She may have died trying to help, not because of anything Mia did. The room fell into stunned silence as the weight of this revelation settled over everyone present. One of the council members reached for the documents, scanning through them quickly, his expression growing increasingly troubled as he read. This cannot be verified simply through old documents alone, the other council member said, though his voice lacked the confidence it had carried moments earlier. Then verify it further, Mia said firmly. Question those still alive who witnessed events from that night. Examine the symbol connected to the founding bloodline, and compare it to any records that remain. I am not asking anyone to simply accept my word. I am asking for a fair investigation, something I was never given 11 years ago. Dalton stared at her, conflicting emotions visible across his face. For years, he had treated her cruelly, absorbing and repeating the same blame the rest of the pack had placed upon her, without question. Now, faced with evidence suggesting his own mother may have died trying to protect the very girl he had tormented, something inside him seemed to shift, uncertain and unsettled. Take this to my father, Dalton said finally, his voice quieter than Mia had ever heard it. He deserves to know the truth, whatever it turns out to be. The council members hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the situation, but ultimately nodded in agreement. recognizing that ignoring evidence this significant carried its own serious risks. They gathered the documents carefully and made their way toward the Alpha's private quarters, tension thick in the air as they walked. Mia's heart pounded with each step, uncertain how the Alpha would react to evidence suggesting the pack had wrongfully blamed her for over a decade, evidence that also implicated members of his own council in a much larger, older conspiracy. When they finally stood before Alpha Gideon Ashwood, Warwick calmly explained everything they had uncovered, presenting the documents, the symbol, and the testimony gathered from Priya and Callum. The Alpha listened in heavy silence, his expression unreadable, as he absorbed each piece of evidence laid carefully before him. When Warwick finished speaking, a long, tense silence filled the room. The Alpha studied the documents carefully himself, his hands trembling slightly as he read through details about his mate's final moments, details that painted an entirely different picture than the one he had believed for over a decade. "If this is true," he said finally, his voice heavy with barely controlled emotion, "then I have spent 11 years blaming an innocent child for a tragedy caused by my own council's failure to protect this pack's true history." "We believe it is true," Warwick said carefully, "though a full investigation would provide additional certainty." The Alpha turned toward Mia, studying her closely for the first time, seemingly seeing her clearly, rather than through the lens of blame he had carried for so long. "You have suffered greatly, because of decisions made long before you were even born," he said quietly. "Decisions that continued to harm you because those responsible refused to accept accountability." Mia felt tears threatening at the corners of her eyes, though she fought to remain composed. "I only wanted the truth," she said. "I never wanted revenge, only understanding." The Alpha nodded slowly, turning his attention toward the council members who had accompanied them. "I want a full investigation, conducted immediately," he ordered firmly. "Every individual connected to the original decisions regarding the founding bloodline's disappearance will be questioned. If anyone within this council played a role in deliberately hiding this truth, either then or over the past 11 years, they will be held fully accountable." The council members nodded reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the direction events had taken, though none dared openly object given the weight of evidence presented. As the meeting concluded, Dalton remained behind, his expression conflicted as he approached Mia carefully. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly, struggling visibly with the admission. "I spent years treating you exactly the way this pack taught me to, without ever questioning whether that treatment was fair." Mia studied him for a long moment, remembering years of cruelty and dismissal, weighed carefully against the genuine regret now visible in his expression. "Apologies mean very little without real change behind them," she said honestly. "But I am willing to see whether your actions moving forward reflect genuine understanding, rather than simply guilt over being caught." Dalton nodded, accepting her words without argument. "That is fair," he said quietly. "More than fair, given everything I have done." As the pack settled into uneasy silence following the confrontation, word of the revelations began spreading quickly throughout Ashwood territory. Whispers that had once carried blame and suspicion now carried confusion, disbelief, and for some, quiet shame, at how easily they had accepted a convenient story, without ever questioning its validity. Mia stood outside the Alpha's quarters, as night deepened around her, staring up at the stars scattered across the dark sky. For the first time in her life, she felt the beginning of something she had never truly experienced before. Not fear, not blame, not quiet resignation, but genuine hope for a future finally built upon truth, rather than convenient lies. The investigation ahead would be difficult, uncovering uncomfortable truths that certain individuals had worked hard to keep buried for generations. But Mia no longer feared what those truths might reveal. She had spent her entire life carrying the weight of blame that never truly belonged to her. Now, finally, she was ready to set that weight down completely, replacing it with the truth she had fought so hard to uncover. Whatever challenges remained ahead, Mia faced them not as the outcast the pack had once despised, but as someone finally beginning to understand her true place within a history far larger and more complicated than she ever could have imagined. The following weeks brought significant changes to Ashwood territory, though none of them came easily. The investigation ordered by Alpha Gideon uncovered layers of deception that had been carefully maintained for generations, implicating several senior council members in efforts to protect secrets that dated back far longer than anyone had initially realized. Two of the council members most directly involved in the original cover-up and its continuation 11 years earlier were formally removed from their positions once evidence against them became undeniable. Throughout this difficult period, Mia found herself in an unfamiliar position. Rather than being dismissed or ignored, pack members now approached her carefully, uncertain how to reconcile years of unfair treatment with the truth that had finally come to light. Some offered quiet apologies, clearly uncomfortable but sincere in their regret. Others remained distant, unsure how to process the significant shift in understanding that had upended everything they believed about the mysterious girl found at the edge of their territory over a decade earlier. Warwick remained close by her side throughout this transition, guiding her through unfamiliar pack politics and helping her navigate conversations she had never expected to have. Priya and Callum, though not officially part of Ashwood, sent word offering continued support, grateful that their testimony had finally helped uncover truths long overdue for acknowledgement. The most significant confirmation came several weeks later, when an elderly pack historian, brought in specifically to examine the founding bloodline's history, conducted a careful examination of Mia herself. Using old records describing distinct physical traits associated with the bloodline, along with additional historical documentation recovered from the sealed archive, the historian confirmed what Warwick had suspected from the very beginning. Mia was indeed the last known direct descendant of the founding bloodline, the true heir to a lineage the pack had believed extinct for generations. The revelation sent ripples of shock throughout the entire pack, forcing many to reconsider everything they thought they understood about their own history and leadership structure. Alpha Gideon called for a formal gathering shortly after the confirmation, bringing together the entire pack to address the situation directly. Standing before the assembled crowd, Mia felt a nervous energy she had never experienced before, though it was tempered by a newfound confidence born from finally understanding her own story. 11 years ago, Alpha Gideon began, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered pack. This community made a grave mistake. We blamed an innocent child for a tragedy she had no part in causing, allowing convenient assumptions to replace careful investigation. That mistake continued for over a decade, causing significant harm to someone who deserved far better from all of us. The crowd remained silent, many exchanging uneasy glances as they absorbed the weight of his words. Recent investigation has revealed the true circumstances surrounding that night, the Alpha continued. Mia Lawson is not connected to my mate's death through any fault of her own. In fact, evidence strongly suggests my mate died attempting to protect Mia from those who sought to harm her, individuals connected to a decades-old conspiracy designed to erase the founding bloodline of this very pack. Murmurs spread through the crowd, disbelief and shock evident on many faces. Dalton, standing near the front of the gathering, remained quiet, his expression solemn as he listened to his father speak. Mia has been confirmed as the last surviving direct descendant of that founding bloodline, Alpha Gideon continued. A lineage this pack was built upon generations ago, before internal conflict led certain individuals to eliminate it through deceptive and harmful means. The very treatment we subjected her to reflects the same pattern of injustice that has haunted this pack's history for far too long. Mia stood beside the Alpha, feeling the weight of countless eyes upon her, some curious, some ashamed, and some still uncertain how to process everything unfolding before them. She thought back to years of quiet suffering, of accepting blame without complaint, because no one had ever given her reason to believe otherwise was possible. Given her confirmed lineage, Alpha Gideon said, turning toward Mia directly, and in recognition of the significant injustice this pack has caused her, I believe it is time for Ashwood to acknowledge her rightful place within our community, not as an outcast, but as an equal, deserving of respect and consideration previously denied to her. The Pack Council, now restructured following the removal of those most directly implicated in the conspiracy, had already discussed the significant implications of Mia's confirmed heritage prior to this gathering. According to the Pack's oldest traditions, rarely invoked in recent generations, a confirmed direct descendant of the founding bloodline held rightful claim to leadership consideration, standing equal to, or in specific circumstances, above the current ruling family. Mia had spent long hours discussing this possibility with Warwick in the days leading up to the gathering, uncertain how she felt about such significant responsibility being placed before her so suddenly. Part of her wanted nothing more than quiet acceptance within the pack, free from the blame she had endured for so long. Another part of her recognized the opportunity such a position could offer, the chance to ensure no other innocent person within Ashwood ever suffered the way she had. Stepping forward slightly, Mia addressed the gathered pack directly, her voice steady, despite the nervous energy still coursing through her. "I did not come here today seeking power or leadership," she said honestly. "I came seeking only the truth, something this pack denied me for over a decade. Now that the truth has finally been acknowledged, I find myself faced with a choice I never expected to make." The crowd listened intently, many visibly moved by her honesty. "I could choose to walk away from this pack entirely," she continued. "After everything I have endured here, no one could blame me for wanting a fresh start elsewhere, free from painful memories and years of unfair treatment. But I have also seen firsthand how easily convenient lies can replace difficult truths when those in power refuse proper accountability. I do not want another child to grow up in this pack fearing rejection, simply because their story does not fit a simpler narrative." Murmurs of agreement rippled through parts of the crowd, though uncertainty remained visible on many faces as well. "If this pack is willing to accept me, not as the outcast you once believed me to be, but as someone genuinely committed to building a fairer, more honest future for Ashwood, then I am willing to accept the responsibility my heritage now places before me," Mia said firmly. "Not out of desire for power, but out of genuine commitment to ensuring what happened to me never happens to anyone else within this community again." A long silence followed her words, broken finally by Warwick stepping forward to address the crowd. "I have watched this young woman endure unimaginable unfairness, with remarkable grace and resilience," he said. "She has shown more integrity throughout this entire ordeal than many who held significant positions of power within this pack for years. I believe she deserves genuine consideration for the responsibility now before her." Slowly, murmurs of support began spreading through the crowd, gaining momentum as more pack members considered the sincerity behind Mia's words, along with the injustice she had so clearly endured. Even those who had previously doubted or dismissed her found themselves reconsidering their earlier assumptions in light of everything now revealed. Dalton stepped forward as well, addressing the crowd directly despite the visible discomfort on his face. "I spent years treating Mia unfairly, believing wholeheartedly in a story I never once questioned," he admitted. "Learning the truth has forced me to reconsider everything I believed about strength, leadership, and fairness within this pack. If anyone here has reason to doubt her sincerity, know that I, more than anyone, have seen the strength of character she has shown throughout this entire situation, especially given how poorly this pack, myself included, treated her for so long." His public admission carried significant weight among the gathered pack members, particularly given his previous reputation as one of Mia's harshest critics. Slowly, the crowd's uncertainty shifted further toward genuine support, recognizing the sincerity behind both Mia's words and Dalton's unexpected admission. Alpha Gideon addressed the pack once more, formally proposing that Mia be granted recognized status as a rightful member of the founding bloodline, with appropriate leadership consideration moving forward, pending further discussion regarding specific responsibilities and structure within the pack's evolving leadership. The pack's response, though not unanimous, reflected overwhelming support for the proposal, a significant shift from the blame and rejection Mia had endured for over a decade. As the formal gathering concluded, pack members slowly approached her, some offering genuine apologies, others simply expressing quiet respect for the resilience she had demonstrated throughout such a painful ordeal. In the weeks that followed, Mia began the difficult process of integrating fully into pack leadership discussions, working alongside Alpha Gideon, Warwick, and a newly restructured council to address the deeper issues that had allowed such significant injustice to persist for so long. She advocated strongly for stronger accountability measures within pack leadership, ensuring that future investigations could not be so easily dismissed or manipulated by those seeking to protect their own interests. Dalton, true to his word, worked diligently to demonstrate genuine change, supporting Mia's efforts within the council and gradually rebuilding whatever trust remained possible between them. Their relationship remained complicated, shaped heavily by years of past mistreatment, but Mia recognized genuine effort when she saw it, allowing cautious space for continued growth between them. Priya and Callum were formally invited back into pack affairs as honored guests, recognized publicly for their crucial role in helping uncover the truth that had remained hidden for so many years. Both expressed quiet pride in watching Mia step into her rightful place, finally free from the unjust blame that had defined so much of her early life. As months passed, Ashwood slowly transformed under the combined leadership of Alpha Gideon and Mia, incorporating stronger protections against the kind of unchecked power and manipulation that had allowed such significant injustice to persist for generations. Mia worked tirelessly to ensure that no future member of the pack, regardless of their background or circumstances, would ever face the kind of unfair blame and rejection she had endured throughout her own childhood. Standing one evening at the edge of the same forest where she had once fled in fear, desperate to escape a pack that despised her without cause, Mia reflected quietly on how dramatically her life had changed. The same trees that once represented desperate escape now stood as quiet witnesses to how far she had come, from frightened outcast to respected leader, working diligently to build a fairer future for the very community that had once rejected her so completely. She thought of Alira, the woman whose sacrifice had protected her that fateful night so many years ago, wherever she may be now, and silently hoped that somewhere she understood the significant impact her protection had ultimately allowed. Mia vowed quietly to honor that sacrifice by ensuring the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, would always hold greater value within Ashwood than convenient lies designed to protect those in positions of power. As the sun set slowly behind the horizon, casting warm golden light across the pack grounds she now called home in an entirely new way, Mia allowed herself, finally, to feel genuine peace. The journey toward uncovering her true identity had been difficult, filled with pain, uncertainty, and moments of genuine fear. But standing here now, recognized not as the outcast the pack once despised, but as someone finally understood and respected for who she truly was, Mia knew without doubt that every difficult step along the way had been worth the truth she had ultimately uncovered. Her story, once defined entirely by unjust blame and quiet suffering, had transformed into something far more powerful, a testament to resilience, truth, and the strength required to challenge even the most deeply rooted injustice. And as Ashwood Pack continued moving forward under her guidance, Mia remained committed to ensuring her own painful journey would ultimately serve a greater purpose, protecting others from ever having to endure what she once had, simply because the truth had once been inconvenient for those unwilling to face it. A year passed before Ashwood territory felt truly settled again, though the changes brought by that year reached far beyond anything the pack had previously experienced. Mia had spent those months not only learning the responsibilities expected of someone connected to the founding bloodline, but also working to understand the deeper history behind the conflict that had led to her family's near erasure generations earlier. During a quiet council session focused on strengthening the pack's record-keeping practices, an unexpected visitor arrived at the Ashwood border, requesting an audience with the pack leadership. The guards, cautious given recent tensions with neighboring territories, escorted the visitor carefully toward the main hall, where Mia and Alpha Gideon were already engaged in discussion. The visitor was an older woman, her posture steady despite visible signs of a difficult journey. When she finally lifted her gaze to meet Mia's, something in her expression shifted, disbelief and cautious hope blending together in a way that immediately caught Mia's attention. "I did not believe it when I first heard the rumors," the woman said quietly, her voice trembling slightly. A descendant of the founding bloodline, alive and recognized within Ashwood after all these years. Mia's heart pounded as she studied the woman carefully, an unfamiliar yet strangely comforting sense of recognition stirring within her. "Who are you?" she asked softly. "My name is Nadia," the woman said. "I served alongside Alira many years ago, before everything fell apart. I searched for her for years after that terrible night, though I eventually lost hope of ever finding answers." Mia felt her breath catch at the mention of Alira's name. "You knew her?" Nadia nodded, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "She was like a sister to me. When she disappeared that night, along with the child she had sworn to protect, I feared the worst had happened to both of you. I never imagined I would live to see the day her sacrifice was finally honored." Mia guided Nadia toward a quiet seating area, eager yet nervous to learn anything more about the woman who had given so much to protect her. Alpha Gideon, sensing the significance of this moment, quietly excused himself, allowing Mia the space to hear this deeply personal history without the pressure of formal pack business surrounding them. Over the following hours, Nadia shared stories of Alira that filled in gaps Mia had long wondered about. She learned that Alira had been fiercely protective, determined, from the moment danger became apparent, to ensure her daughter would survive, even if it meant sacrificing her own safety entirely. Nadia explained that Alira had always believed the founding bloodline carried an important responsibility, one focused on fairness and protection rather than power for its own sake. Values Mia realized she had somehow carried forward, despite growing up without any direct knowledge of her true heritage. "She would be incredibly proud of you," Nadia said softly, watching Mia carefully. "Not simply because you survived, but because of how you chose to use the truth once it was finally revealed. Many in her position might have sought revenge against those who wronged them. You chose understanding and reform instead." Mia felt tears forming as she absorbed Nadia's words, grateful beyond measure for this unexpected connection to a mother she had never truly known. "Do you know what happened to her after that night?" she asked carefully, bracing herself for whatever answer might come. Nadia's expression grew somber. "I searched for years, following every rumor and lead I could find. Eventually, I discovered evidence suggesting she did not survive the injuries sustained while ensuring your safety. I am deeply sorry to be the one to confirm what you may have already suspected." Though the confirmation carried undeniable sadness, Mia found a strange sense of peace settling over her as well. She finally understood, without lingering uncertainty, the sacrifice made on her behalf so many years ago. Rather than allowing that knowledge to bring only sorrow, Mia resolved to honor Alira's memory through the positive changes she continued working toward within Ashwood. Nadia remained within Ashwood territory for several weeks, sharing additional stories and helping Mia understand the deeper history and values associated with the founding bloodline she now represented. Her presence provided a comforting connection to a past Mia had never fully understood, filling gaps that had remained painfully empty throughout her difficult childhood. As Nadia eventually prepared to continue her own journey, she offered Mia one final piece of guidance. "Your mother believed deeply in second chances," she said, "in giving people the opportunity to grow beyond their mistakes, provided they demonstrated genuine effort toward meaningful change. I see that same wisdom reflected clearly in how you have chosen to lead here." Mia embraced Nadia warmly before her departure, grateful for the closure and connection this unexpected visit had provided. Though her mother remained forever beyond her reach, Mia now carried forward a clearer understanding of the values and strength that had defined Alira's life. Values she remained determined to reflect in her own leadership moving forward. Life within Ashwood continued evolving steadily in the months that followed. The restructured council, now operating under significantly stronger accountability measures, worked diligently to address lingering tensions from the pack's difficult history. Mia focused much of her efforts on ensuring younger pack members grew up within a community defined by fairness rather than convenient assumptions. Determined that no child would ever again suffer the isolation and blame she had endured throughout her own early years. Dalton, having spent considerable time demonstrating genuine growth and understanding, gradually earned back meaningful trust within the pack, working closely alongside Mia on various leadership initiatives. Their relationship, though shaped permanently by the difficult history between them, evolved into a genuine partnership built upon mutual respect and shared commitment toward Ashwood's continued improvement. The relationship between Ashwood and the neighboring Kirkwood clan also saw significant improvement during this period. Mia, drawing upon her own painful experience with unfair assumptions, advocated strongly for open dialogue rather than continued suspicion between the two packs. Through careful negotiation, long-standing tensions gradually eased, replaced by cautious cooperation that benefited both communities significantly. One evening, nearly 2 years after the truth about her heritage had first come to light, Mia stood once again at the edge of the forest, where her difficult journey toward understanding had truly begun. The same trees that once witnessed her desperate flight from a pack that despised her now stood as quiet reminders of how dramatically circumstances had changed. Warwick joined her quietly, his presence a comforting constant throughout everything she had experienced since that fateful night. "You have built something remarkable here," he said softly, watching the pack grounds spread out peacefully before them. "Something built upon genuine truth and fairness, rather than convenient assumptions. Mia smiled softly, thinking back to the frightened, uncertain girl who had once fled through these same trees, desperate to escape a pack determined to blame her for tragedy she had no part in causing. "I could not have done any of this without your willingness to finally speak the truth that night," she said sincerely. "You gave me the chance to understand my own story, rather than simply accepting the painful lies I had been told my entire life." Warwick shook his head gently. "You did the difficult work yourself, Mia. I simply pointed you toward the truth. You were the one brave enough to pursue it, despite significant risk and uncertainty." As they stood together, watching the sun set peacefully over the pack grounds, Mia reflected on everything her journey had taught her. She had learned that truth, however uncomfortable, ultimately held far greater value than convenient lies, designed to protect those unwilling to face accountability. She had learned that resilience, patience, and genuine commitment toward fairness could transform even the most painful circumstances into something meaningful and positive. Most importantly, she had learned that her own worth had never truly depended on the acceptance or approval of those who had once despised her without cause. Instead, her true value had always existed within her own resilience, integrity, and unwavering commitment toward doing what was right, regardless of how difficult that path might become. As darkness slowly settled over Ashwood territory, the pack grounds below glowed warmly with lantern light, filled with the quiet sounds of a community steadily healing from years of hidden injustice. Mia allowed herself a final, peaceful moment of reflection, before turning back toward the pack she now called home, in every sense of the word, ready to continue building a future defined not by blame and rejection, but by truth, fairness, and genuine understanding for every member of the community she had once believed would never fully accept her. Her journey had been long, painful, and filled with unexpected challenges, but standing here now, surrounded by a pack finally united by truth rather than convenient lies, Mia understood with complete certainty that every difficult step along the way had ultimately led her exactly where she was always meant to be.